Hello folks, this is Isaac from Isaac's Art, and I'm going to be showing you how to change the differential oil in your 1995 Jeep Wrangler. You're going to start off with a couple of items that you're going to need. You're going to need a gasket maker to make a nice seal between the cover and the differential itself. And then of course you're going to need new differential oil. You're also going to need a brake pan, and I used a block of wood to keep my car from rolling over and crushing myself. Now to remove the bolts from that, you're going to need a 1/2 inch socket, and then you're also going to need a 3/8 inch, just the square end that plugs into it to remove the cover from the plug from the differential on the front. So we're going to start off with loosening all the bolts, and well, it takes a while. There's a lot of them. Now a couple of them are a pain to get to just because of where they're located, but I was able to get to all of them and loosen all of them up. And after a while, you are able to loosen all of them up by hand. And if you look at the left-hand side of the differential cover there, you will see, and you may not see it easily in this one, but you will later on, there is a tag that goes between two of the bolts that just lets you know what type of differential you have, and then it also lets you know if you will end up needing a additive to add to your oil for if you have the limited slip differential. So I was able to get that cracked open, and I got all the old oil drained out. And so now it was just time to actually replace, or to take the actual cover itself off, that I could clean the inside out and then clean the surfaces that I could apply a new gasket. And so here it is coming off. And basically what I'm having to do right now is just break the gasket that's sticking between both parts. And she's off, and there is the filthy differential. Now I did try to do a little bit of lightning on here, which didn't work all that well. I was hoping you'd be able to see a little bit better the filth that was inside, but we're just going to have to stick to seeing it like this, with the angle that it was at, and you can see all the light. The camera was compensating for the light coming in from underneath the car and just didn't adjust quite as well as I would have liked to the absence of light from underneath the car. But it's just time to let that drain, and I went and grabbed a paint scraper or a putty knife, whatever you want to call it. Not the one that uses the razor blade, just a flat piece of metal basically. And I was going to be using that, as you can see right here, to scrape the old gasket off of both the cover, and then you're also going to do that for the differential itself. The chisel just did not work anywhere near as good as just the flat non-sharp paint scraper did. And then I just took some brake fluid, or not brake fluid, but the brake cleaner, and sprayed it down with that to clean out all of the old oil as well as the grime that was just stuck to the cover here. And then once you're done with the cover, you just repeat the exact same process on the differential itself. And so scraping off all that old gasket. And then once you apply the new gasket, you do end up, after you just hand tighten all of the bolts until you notice the gasket making material leaking out from the edges just a little bit, and then you let it sit for an hour to let that dry up, and then you actually get to torque it down, which I will show you once I get there. The manual does not say anything about using the brake cleaner, but one of the other individuals that I've been watching to see how to change the differential oil on YouTube, he did that on his car, and it made the cleaning process a lot easier. Depending on how often you're changing your oil, you may not need to do that. But I bought my car last year, and I had no idea when it was changed last. So here we are, just actually putting the gasket material in place. And that just takes a little bit. You want to make sure you go all the way around all of the holes, that you can ensure a good seal, because you don't want any oil leaking out um, well, while you're driving. And I did also find that it was easiest to put one of the bolts through the cover, and then you can just line that up with the differential real nice and easy. Tighten that one piece up, or the one bolt up, and then as soon as you get another bolt in place, the cover's in place, and you just have to go around and finger tighten up the rest of them. And then once those are all tightened up, you just get to sit for an hour until you actually torque it in place. And so while I was waiting for the front to dry up, I started work on the back in removing the rear cover. Now I am laying down on the ground and I'm in a slightly uncomfortable position, and because of that I also just don't have quite as much strength in my arms as I did when I was working on the front. So it did take me a little bit longer to get those loosened up, and I did have to reposition myself a couple of times just because it was an uncomfortable area. I'm stuck under the gas tank. I don't have as much arm room, and so I did get a little, well, not so much sore, but it was just uncomfortable to loosen up some of those. But I did get them all off. And then on the back, the plug is strictly a rubber stopper that gets pushed in place and seals the hole off. So again, you want to make sure you can get the plug removed from the cap before you remove the cap from the differential, just so that you know what you're working with and what you have to do to refill it up. Because obviously, yeah, you can take the differential cover off and drain all the oil out and remake the gasket and restick the cover on. But if you can't take the cap or the plug out of the cap, well, now you can't refill the oil in your differential. So you want to make sure before you start that you can remove that. Otherwise, you just know that you have another step that you have to do, which would be removing that plug. Whether it's just completely rusted in place and you have to drill it out and then clean all your threads and then order a new one, or exactly what. But that's just going to be another step that you would have to deal with that I didn't have to deal with. So I'm not able to film that and show you how I would do it because I didn't have to do it. But here is all of the old oil from in the back. It doesn't look that filthy on camera, but it was. Especially right in the beginning, there was a lot of thicker stuff that came out, and now it's just more so, the surface tension that was holding it on and just covering everything, which it's supposed to do, just leaking off and then draining into the bucket. Um, Here I am. I was able to use the paint scraper to separate the back one instead of using the cold chisel that I'd used in the front. It was a lot easier going with the paint scraper and just pushing it between and then twisting it a little bit to break that seal. So that's what I would recommend and what I would be doing in the future, or will be doing in the future, come whenever I have to change my differential oil again. I don't know exactly when that would be because I didn't read that far in my manual or in my owner's manual. But I do know it should be done from what I had seen and other people saying. There's some people that change theirs as much as like every year. It's all based off of miles that you drive it. With me, I typically am just going to be driving it in the winter, so I'm probably not going to have to do it as often as others, and I don't do much off-roading either. Um, but again, all depending, you're going to want to check your owner's manual, check your shop guide, whatever, to see exactly how often it is that you're going to want to change yours. And here we can see how nice and clean that cap is, and you can also see the brake cleaner drying off on that. And now it's time once again just to repeat that exact same step that we've just done 3 previous times on the rear differential, which includes scraping off all of the old gasket, spraying it down with the brake cleaner, and then on the rear one I also took a rag with the brake cleaner on it and just wiped off that whole seal and was able to get the majority of the gasket off. And you do want to be careful while you're spraying it down that you do not spray any of that brake cleaner in your face or have it bounce off and splash you in the face or anything like that, because as I was reading the warnings on the container, it is nasty stuff, and it is also highly flammable. So I would also not recommend smoking while changing the differential oil on your car, or especially while cleaning this out. I'd say that you can wait and smoke later on, but with some people out there, you probably can't, and so you will probably want to take a break, smoke, and then come back and finish it up. Or in severe circumstances, I guess, work for another 5 minutes and then take another smoke break. All depends on how often you smoke or if you smoke. I do not, so I did not have to worry about that. And if you're still watching this video, congratulations. It is probably boring. But nonetheless, I bought the camera, I have the software, and, well, I have a YouTube account that I should be updating, occasionally. And so this gives me a chance to practice, piecing my videos together and get something that's at least slightly entertaining. And some more spray, some more cleaning, and it's almost done. Now on both the front and the rear differential, I did notice, oh, look at that. An hour's been by since we put the gasket on the front, and it's time to tighten that up. My manual said 30 foot-pounds, and so that's what I tightened it to. You will want to consult your manual just to make sure it also says 30 foot-pounds because, well, I don't want to be held responsible if someone either tightens it up too much or not enough and the differential cap falls off while they're driving. That would be very bad, and I don't want anyone suing me because of that. So I put that little disclaimer in there. Check for yourself. My video is strictly for a reference. It is not the guide itself. So, with that being said, we can watch me tighten up these bolts some more. Alright, enough of that. And it's time to apply the gasket to the rear cover. Once again, you want to make sure you go completely around all of the bolts, or all of the holes for the bolts, which I shall be doing once I apply the first bead all the way around. I tried doing that in, one continuous stream just to make sure that there was no area where the oil would be able to leak out, but I wasn't able to quite do that. And then a little bit of dust blew in there that I wanted to make sure I cleaned out of it. Here we are going around all those bolts. Again, you want to make sure there aren't any holes because, well, you don't want the oil to leak out while you're driving or parked or anything like that. And so that was done. I managed to put a bolt through the one hole, line it up, and tighten her up. And I made the mistake of not filming me doing the torque on the rear side here after the hour was up, but I did torque that up, and you can see there on the left again there's the plate that will tell you what type of differential you have, which depending on the differential will vary how much oil you need, as well as if you need the additive for your oil for the limited slip differential. But now that that is basically done, it's time to, well, wash your hands and wait 24 hours. So here I am washing my hands. Now my hands were relatively grimy, as you could see from the video, and just a little bit of that grime got onto my camera as well. So I decided I should really wash my camera as well. So I ran that under some water, put some soap on it, cleaned it off. Just so that you guys don't do this with your own cameras, I do have a GoPro, and I did have it in the waterproof housing. So I could actually wash it under running water. I know with most cameras you put them underwater and you kill the camera. There are cameras out there where you don't have to worry about that. Mine is one of those. So again, just so you don't put your camera under the water and rub it down with soap after you're doing this and stuff, if you decide to film your, changing your differential, just make sure it's okay to actually put yours underwater. And so I was able to just, tighten it all up real easy. And now it's time to, well, actually fill it up after we waited our 24 hours there. I was thinking this was just going to be real easy, squeeze the oil into there, fill it up, all done, nice and easy. But it turns out the oil I was putting in there has a slightly, a slightly thicker viscosity than the oil that came out. And so it wasn't quite as easy as I was planning. what I was going to be doing, as you can see right here, is I have the hose. I was just going to plug that onto the cap from the oil bottle and basically squeeze the oil into the differential. I was able to cut the tip off no problem. It fit onto the hose no problem, although it would have been nicer had it gone a little bit further, but again, it wasn't that big a deal. So I was able to take the oil and just squeeze it in, and well, it would have gone all nice and easy, except, of course, for the fact that I couldn't get air back into the bottle. So me being the genius that I am, decided, well, hey, I can just pop a hole in the back of the oil container and the oil will just drain right out like it would if it was motor oil. But it's thicker than motor oil, and well, here's how fast it moves through that hose all by itself. I would have been stuck holding that bottle with the oil on it because, well, I couldn't squeeze it out anymore because my bottle had a hole in the top. Had I made a nice round hole instead of just cutting into it with a razor blade, I possibly could have plugged the hole with my finger and squeezed it and forced the oil out. But I hadn't done that, and so I couldn't do that. So here it was just waiting as the oil slowly but surely made its way through the hose. Um, which, as you can see, was going to take a long time. And I had the boxes up about as high as I could, or the container of the oil up about as high as I could as I was siphoning the oil out. And, well, it was taking a long time. Here you can see it doesn't quite go from the start because of the transition. But coming from the top of the ice cream pail that I had the oil in and just running its way down into the differential, it takes quite a while. And yes, this is playing at real speed. I am not slowing it down or speeding it up. And here it is at 10 times speed. So there it is. It's inside now. And that just goes to show how long I would have to be waiting there to get that in. So I decided to, well, try to speed things up a little bit. So I took, because I had 3 bottles of the fluid, I went and I just cut the tip off of another bottle and just sprayed it right inside of that differential. And that really worked no problem, but again, I could only get out so much of the oil from in the bottle and I just couldn't squeeze it anymore. And in the back, I really, working with that same bottle, had just as bad an issue because the gas tank was in the way. So I went and did what I should have done in the beginning. I made a pressure pump of sorts. If that's actually what it's called, I don't know. But what I did was I took the lid off of a jelly jar and drilled 2 holes in it. On the one side, I ran a hose all the way down to the bottom of the jar. That could then also run up into my differential. And on the other side, I took a much shorter hose and ran it just into the lid of the jar that I could then pump air into that other side. And so what I was then able to do was pump air into the jar through the one spigot, or the one hose, and it would then force the oil up through the other hose and into the differential. I started off using a little handheld pump, and that just took way too long. And I was like, why am I doing all this hard manual labor? I have power tools. So I got out our air compressor and our spray nozzle for that. And originally I tried hooking the hose up inside because you can get different little replacement rubber tips for on the sprayer, but the hose was just a little large to fit in that. So what I did was I put the rubber cap back on and just lined up, or pushed the rubber cap into the hose and just give that a bit of a squeeze, and it forces the air into the jar, which forces the oil up through the other hose and into the differential. And you can see it is running a little slow right now, but that's because I'd only set it for like 20 psi, and I shortly thereafter changed my mind and went, I can up the pressure on this, and so I did. Um, but as you can see, it is going a lot faster than just siphoning the oil out through it was. And so I think I just adjusted the air pressure gauge there. You can see a couple little bubbles forming in the oil as I push the air in. Another reason why I had turned the air pressure up was I did not have a perfect seal where the hoses went through the lid of the jar. I sealed it a bit, but it didn't form quite as good a seal as I had wanted. And so some of the air was leaking out through that. But I was able to get it pumping through no problem. And so I just needed to, fill that jar up a couple of times and spray it in, blow it into the differential, and it was full. So that was really nice. And let's see if we can see how fast that oil drains. So again, it takes a while, but had I had a perfect seal up on the top, it would have been a bit faster. But it was a much quicker way of doing it than just siphoning it out from, a different container. I wouldn't be surprised if out there is someone who makes that cap that would fit onto, whatever different oil containers, and it would already have a longer piece that would go all the way down at the bottom. You just take the old cap off, stick this new cap on, blow some air in there, and boom, it drains all the oil out. But I didn't have anything like that.
What does that work?
How does it work?
Yeah. You suck air, or do you?
You blow air.
Oh, I know why. You blow air, and the water goes up the tube.
Yep.
That's how it works. Because if you blow it on the back and there's stuff, it will blow up.
And because there's a lid on it, the air can't just escape.
Yeah, well, it has to go.
It has to, although there's the holes on the top.
And it can't go in yours.
Correct, because mine's pushing the air out.
Yeah, because why?
And it's also a shorter hose.
Yeah. This will be two another probably around.
Basically empty.
Yeah, like two things.
And that little voice that you hear in the background, that's my little brother. He came out to help me.
Oh, you can see the stuff going down. Yeah. It goes pretty fast actually. Is it leaking or is that just from this stuff?
It's leaking along this edge.
Because it is supposed to be air.
It's supposed to be. If it was airtight, it would go a lot faster. But it's not.
And otherwise, if you wouldn't have that white stuff on it,
It wouldn't work at all.
yeah, because the air could escape from. Oh, spider. But good. That it tight lines into tiny. What is that black thing?
That's the plug for the hole.
Oh. This young guy can get
Right?
there. What?
And so once I was done with the back, I decided, hey, I can do this exact same thing on the front. So I took the ice cream pail that I had that was siphoning the oil out, and just, poured that in. There was a fly that had landed in the oil and, got stuck. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't pour him into there and then pump him into the differential. And so I had to swish it around there a little bit to get him to the edge. But I was able to then stick that into the differential, spray it in there no problem, and well, it made it a lot easier. And so I just had, that little bit extra of the oil to pump on in. And there you can see the oil itself goes through there a lot faster than it did when it was just being siphoned through. And, well, you can see the oil going down in the jar. And that basically finished up filling it up. Once the oil starts to leak out of the hole, you know you've got enough oil in there. And then it's basically just, reapply the cap. And depending again on what type of differential you have, with some of them they recommend, just driving back and forth, doing crazy eights, different things like that. Um, with mine, I did take it for a short little drive after that just to make sure the oil wasn't leaking out. And there's, not that I had seen at least, any torque setting for the cap. They just said make sure it's on there snug because, again, you don't want it to loosen up on you while you're driving and either leak oil out or get contaminants in. And that was it. And my differential was, or the differential oil was all changed. And I had new gaskets. And so then all that was left was just my little test drive. And here we go. So they were doing some railroad work by our house the previous couple of days. And so I just went and drove over it. I mean, it's all, 2 blocks away. Drove to look at the train tracks, see what they had done that day, and then just turn around and head home. But it worked real nice.